what's going on between my ears. Everyone seems to be so clear, but I'm feeling foggy. Could I be sick? Let's talk about it with Ronnie and Nick. It's Mental Health Awareness Month. It's Mental Health Awareness Month. Mental Health Awareness Month.
What's up, everybody? Thank you for stopping in and welcome to the Judgement Seesaw. This is the inaugural episode over on Good Guy AI on YouTube, and I am your host, Ronnie Evans, and I am joined here by a very special guest for the inaugural episode. Again, it's Nick Whalen. He's got a great story to tell and a lot of really fantastic insights from his professional life in the world of mental health, and I don't want to steal your thunder too much. So, Nick, why don't you give us just a little rundown on who you are, kind of in relation to mental health, what your story is, and then certainly plug your fantasy football stuff as well, too.
Sure. Thanks, man. How much time do we have just for that part? Well, in terms of mental health in football, to make it kind of fun to start. So if you can see in the background, let me see here. So this is the 85 Bears. Okay. And over here in the corner, this is a signed Walter Payton football. There, I got it right. I'm a Bears fan, but I live in Wisconsin, so which has been pretty tough, So if you think of like how is your team doing emotionally where you live, but yes, I live in Wisconsin. My day job is I'm a counselor. I've done that for 14, 15 years. It's hard to keep track, honestly, over time. Coached college football for a little while, high school football as well. I think that's a nice platform to reach a lot of like mental health of like young men, that are tend to not talk about their feelings, right? Tend not to get into some of the things that matter. So I kind of like that part of it. In terms of, let's see, the fantasy industry, man, long time ago, kind of started on Matt Waldman's RSP site. Thank you, Matt, for helping me, starting that. And then Ryan McDowell got me at DLF. And then I was at Dynasty Trade Calculator. I was at Dynasty Nerds, and now I'm at Football Guys. So I've been with a lot of the companies. There's so many great people, and I've been pretty lucky.
Well, you've been around the bush for sure in the fantasy industry. You're one of the longer tenured and better known names. So don't sell yourself too short. I am very I feel very humbled that you would come on and do this with me. I appreciate you, and we've got, I would call it a budding friendship developing through private DMs on Twitter. And I'm excited to get on with you and take these to the next level, not just for me selfishly, but for the viewers out there. Your insight on mental health in general and having hands-on experience working with youth throughout the years is just going to lend a treasure trove of information. But with all of that said, the Judgement Seesaw, I'm not sure if it's a concept that you had been familiar with yet, but for the viewers out there, that is a it's not well, I guess it is a seesaw, but the Judgement Seesaw was originally an economic philosophy that was developed by a guy, Herbert Simon, that has to go in the rationale that people make in buying and purchasing and choosing things. But it has been parlayed and adopted by the mental health community over the last 10 years in just to help people learn to listen better and self-check themselves in moments of strife or animosity, because it's a great exercise. You can try it at home, try it later tonight or tomorrow, but you cannot act on a form of judgment. You can't judge people and understand them at the same time. It is literally impossible. And when my therapist brought up this theory to me a few years ago, I tried for weeks to beat it, and I couldn't. And so there's this interesting divide between those two. And I think it lends also directly to fantasy sports, because what do? We judge players, we judge our friends, we judge our teammates, we judge each other's content. There's naturally, I don't think, unhealthy negativity that comes in this industry, but then layered on top of it, there is a lot of not animosity, but a lot of struggle. And whether it's in personal fantasy league drama or a variety of other instances just throughout the industry. So
can I jump into that real quick?
Yep.
So one thing that helps me, and I think a lot of people get, and when you think of mental health, I mean, sometimes it's depression, sometimes it's stress or just an event, right? Well, there's a lot of emotion and stress and events that can happen while you're driving, right? Like road rage, right? And
Hmm.
so one way that I think has kind of changed my view of that is, let's say there's somebody that cuts you off, right? And you get mad or something, right? Or they do something there that makes you mad. You don't know what that person's going through, right? Like, what if they lost a loved one? What if they just lost their job and they don't care and they're just angry, or um, they got scammed and lost their life savings, or whatever. Like, we don't know. And all of that just really checks. Like, if you view things through like a different lens like that, you're just like, oh, okay, this actually doesn't matter in the whole scheme of life. And I
Right. Right.
don't need to, give them a signal or whatever it would be. So I think that's a just a reframe, and kind of I think what that theory is just think of it in a different light. And I think you can't be angry at that person.
Right. This is the old adage, like, put yourself in their shoes for a second and try to relate and give yourself perspective. And I actually, that's a great segue into just a couple discussions that we could have. So for you, what are some of the unique mental health challenges that you see like in the fantasy sports industry? Some examples you can think of and some ways that you might address those issues.
Yeah, I think there's a lot. I think it's different, and I'll start off maybe with like some maybe some simple ones. We'll get into maybe some more in depth ones.
Sure.
Like one would be, what like what's your goal? Because I think sometimes people are like, I want to reach so many followers. I want to, some people are like, I feel like I'm not relevant anymore. All that kind of stuff, and or they want to be famous or whatever it is. And I just think that that's kind of the wrong way to go about all of it.
Mm,
If I wanted to be famous, I want to be famous to the people in my real life. Like my partner, my wife, my husband, whatever you are, your kids, your friends, your family, like the people that you see. That's who you should be famous to. Like, and it can be tough because we're glued to. Oh, hold on, is there breaking news? And if I don't get out my opinion on it, then I'm
right.
going to be irrelevant. Or if I'm not glued to my phone, I'm going to miss out on something, and then it's going to be okay. Like, I promise you that. But if you continually ignore your partner, your kids, your family, your friends, that's going to have a bigger impact. So I think sometimes like just just that thing of that, and again, that might not even be true. Like, of, hey, I'm not relevant. All like that's just a thought that we have, that we make up. And like, you don't know, like you like right here, this channel, there could be 3 people that watch it. There could be 3 million people that watch it. Like, we
Sure.
really don't know. We're just recording it. And anything that you put out there in social media, you don't know what could happen, or people that follow along or want to see you. But I do know the people that you see all the time, they love you and they matter. And I think that not
Yes.
ignoring them, like, is something that's really big, and we need to kind of refocus sometimes on that.
I think that's really poignant. And as you were talking, it reminded me of like my personal relationships in juxtaposition against the fantasy industry and my use case for the fantasy industry for the last half decade has been a bit of a like social and friend need that has been met. I cut out a lot of toxic relationships in my personal life in my late 20s, and I've been in therapy for the last 5 years working through some
Mhm.
demons. And was talking to actually my dad just a couple weeks ago. I was telling him that I was pretty lonely and I don't have a ton of adults in my like within the 10-mile vicinity that I spend a lot of time with one-on-one in person anymore.
Mhm.
And I realized that he said, "You're not, what are you talking about? You have like 700 friends that you talk with like once a month on the internet." And I said, that's the difference is you could have 6,000 friends, but do you think, Nick, that there is truth to the idea or the effect of relying on social media for actual social interaction, and can it be detrimental to people's psyche or provide like a fake sense of validation versus something more real?
Actually, that's a really good point. I run into that because I talked to I'm getting married later this month, so I'll reference her
Congrats.
thank you. I'll
I
reference
should
her as
have
my
led the podcast off with that. My bad.
yeah, yeah, I should. So I'll reference her as my wife. That's easier, than fiance, because when people maybe they watch this, maybe it's after that fact. But um, I'll reference them as like my internet friends, or like, I don't
Right.
know how you word that, but like, even so, like some of those people I talk to on the phone or through different apps or whatever, and I've met a bunch of them, like later this summer, the Scott Fish Bowl. Like I've met Scott, I've met Ryan McDowell,
That's
like I've met a bunch of people. Like if you go to the expo, you meet them. And I think the difference, Ronnie, for me anyway, is when I'm worried about how many likes my tweet got, how many replies I got, how many followers I have versus or staying relevant, however you want to word that, versus like how many people I can go to and talk to, and they ask about me. And you were talking about this, I believe you said this, or I'm imagining it maybe, but in terms of like listening, right? Something of like how working on listening, that's like such a lost form of not just, I think, internet or social media, but just in person. Is someone will tell a story, and then we'll tell a story about ourselves back in that, versus like diving into that person's story. Like Ronnie, if you told me, you're what's the last like vacation or place you went to?
Santa Fe.
Oh wow, okay. What did you do there?
Drank a lot of wine and ate good food for a week.
Okay, that sounds good. Did you go there
Yeah.
with a bunch of people, or
It was a family trip.
okay? All right, cool. So like right there, right? I have a little feel for it, right? Like if I went deeper, I'd be like, hey, what was your favorite thing or favorite place you saw or whatever, right? Versus sometimes people like, oh, hey, I went to Santa Fe, right? You're like, oh, cool, yeah, I went to LA, right?
Exactly.
And
Yes.
and you're like, we're just throwing stories at each other versus like investing into. So to me, to answer your question, like if you had people that invested into your story and their text message only, their FaceTime, it's through tweets, or if it's somebody just you see face to face, it doesn't matter because they're investing in you, and that's a true friendship.
Right. I think that's true. And I also, for any of my fantasy football friends that are watching this, I wanted to ask that question because I personally value a lot of the relationships that I've made over the years with people in the fantasy industry just as much as I do real life relationships that I've made. And I think for me, philosophically, I have a drive to like make the fantasy industry my second family.
Mhm.
And so it's a bit maybe more personal of approach than your average Joe or average member would take with this place. And it's been great. I like people like you, Nick, and just being able to socialize and reach out and put myself out there. But you just talked about uh active listening, I think is the term for that strategy, like being able to sit there and provide poignant, like direct questions that are about the person or about what the person is talking about. And it makes people feel good. It's a whole chapter. If you ever work in sales, you're going to have to do like a bunch of training on active listening. But
Mhm.
when you were talking about it, you mentioned, oh, I could just start talking about my trip to Santa Fe. And it made me think about literally the opening of this episode where I asked you about you. I said a few remarks about you, and then I talked about me for like 3 minutes.
Mhm.
And so I need to work on that as well. And I think that the beauty of mental health is it's a never ending road to
Yep.
improvement. We can always improve
Mhm.
habits and tendencies.
Mhm.
What
But
are
but hold on,
go ahead.
being aware of it, I think is half the battle. Like that's like with
Mm,
anything. If people have alcoholism or, gambling or whatever it is, having an awareness of it is at least some of the battle, because someone said this recently. I thought it was like so good. Um, People trying to lose weight, right? It's kind of a battle between, calorie intake, right? And moving your body is kind of the formula, right? And they said the biggest part of the battle is mentally not trying to go get some chips or go get some fries quicker. You know what I
yeah,
mean? Like it's the
yeah.
mental battle part of it. And I'm like, that's so true. And so kind of being aware of it is big. There's like you had mentioned this in terms of relationships. Cutting out some toxic ones. And that's a boundary. And actually, kind of just staying with the fantasy industry and some interesting like dynamics they have. There's this, I think, connotation that setting up boundaries within, let's say, your social media, right? Generally, I would think this would be X or Twitter, whatever you call it, is, if you block people, right, then
Mm,
then you're soft, right? But the interesting part of social media is everyone has access to you, right? If it's a public, thing, and that's supporters, that's current employers, future employers, right? That's all going to be out there. Haters, trolls, whatever you want to have, and anyone could just, anything you put out there, Ronnie, they can just support it or they can just drag you, right? And I think one of the things that should be more accepted is muting and blocking people. And because it's if you were in real life and someone was doing all this stuff, you wouldn't continue to have conversations with them or continue to
Right.
approach them or be in those environments. You just be like, well, you know what? This isn't good for me. And like we're going to continue to do things that are good for us, right? Like if I'm allergic to some kind of food, I'm not going to be like, well, I have to keep eating this. And if I don't, then I'm soft. You're like, well, I probably shouldn't because I,
Right.
break out in hives or I don't know, whatever the allergic reaction is. Like, it's just like, this isn't good for me. And so is certain people or, certain places, things like that. And I think that needs to be more accepted because, you have this profile and anyone can be on there and they can, say whatever they want. Like, man, sometimes I just don't want to hear because the things that we hear, the things that we see, the things that we are a part of shape us. And I think taking
Yes.
out some of that negative energy makes it healthy for us.
Have you, over your long tenured illustrious career in the fantasy industry, have you have you found yourself having to put up a lot of boundaries over the years?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I've had, when you feel, I don't know, attacked or whatever it is.
Of course.
This is gonna, I mean, you have to value your time. How much are you gonna debate with somebody? You have to value that, and I like debating. People know I like debating, but I also like learning. Like, I want to know, you know, who's your running back three? And if my running back three is someone different, I want to know why that's your running back three, because then I learn from it. But also, I mean, if there's someone, and this is gonna sound bad, but if there's someone that doesn't follow me, okay, and they have a response maybe in a certain way, I can already tell this is not going to be a productive part of my time. And maybe I'm not going to respond to it. Maybe that's going to seem
Yeah.
bad, but I'm like, well, this is not going to be valuable for either of us. Or they just want to troll, or they, made a fake account and they're just gonna. So I think you have to be very careful with where you spend your time and then setting up those boundaries.
I think that's really good advice. I would just add in that for anyone that's watching that's newer to the industry, like there's not as much vitriol or negativity in this industry publicly as compared to like 5 or even 6 years ago. The industry seems to be doing a lot better year
Yeah,
over
it is.
year.
Mhm.
Doesn't mean we don't have our outbursts and moments of like collective inappropriateness. But it's been cool for me. I've only really had my nose to the industry for the last 8 years. So um, and that's just been observation based. It hasn't been a lot of hands on working with people. And my read on it is that the industry is doing better every year. And I think a big part of it is these shows that people did last year about mental health. And
Mhm.
Fantasy and Frames had a show. FF Face Off does the podathon every year. And this effort that seems to be growing alongside professional athletes and the narrative in America right now around mental health has gotten more and more open as the years go on. And I
Mhm.
think it breeds a little bit more understanding and
Mhm.
less judgment among our community as a collective. Um, what personal mental health practices do you find the most helpful? It could be that you see being the most effective for kids that come in and do counseling with you, or that you have taken part in yourself. And would you mind sharing any of those?
Yeah, I'll use one that I shared today, um, and it's gratitude. And I know that's super
Mm,
easy to like hear it, and you're like, okay, yeah. And just again, I'm not going to obviously share the person, but today how I shared it was personally. So like whenever I'm struggling with, and again, everyone has a struggle too. I think that's something that you always think people have their vacation pictures, like yours going where you were, and everyone's smiling, and maybe it's filtered up or however it is, and it's just like everyone has some kind of battle that they're going through, generally. I mean, and so I think we think like I'm the only one going through this, and that's not true. But the one thing that always brings me back to and kind of grounds me is I think of a couple of things. One is um, I'm healthy, I'm not hungry, I have clothing, and I have shelter. And I think you hear those things and you're like, well, yeah, obviously, not for everybody,
no.
and so like, for example, this is pretty personal, but 2 weeks ago, my cousin passed away, and he's 51, and it whenever people pass away that generally that I know, it obviously affects you more. Like for example, Tags, right? I was friends with Tags, and Tags passed away, and and I still think about it, and it's been a couple of years at this point, but to me, it just makes me reframe. Does this really matter right now? What I'm worrying about, what I'm spending my mental energy on, versus there are people that I care about that are no longer here, and would they if they, if they were here, they'd be like, "Hey, Nick, that's not really something you need to worry about. You need to worry about the people that you care about that are
Right.
here, or something productive you can do with your day." So that's something. And even along with those healthy lines, it would be, you know, there are people that have cancer. There are people that I know that they can't see. They don't have all of their limbs. They, um, they're battling with something health wise, and it's like, you know what? Maybe I'm taking that for granted. Or, you think of shelter, I mean, I don't know wherever you drive, Ronnie, but around here, they're the homeless people that you
Yeah.
see, I think, quite often. Um, and, you have people that are hungry, and they don't maybe, I mean, I see homeless populations and they go to the food banks and all of those things to get some of that stuff. I mean, you go through all those basic things and you think about, man, why don't I have 3,000 followers? And you're like, what are you like? That's not something that you should, because you give all the basic things. There are people that wish they were you. And to me, that like is like, whoa, okay, I need to like, I should probably smile. I should probably be grateful for all the things that I do have.
I love that. So you talked a little bit about grounding, which is my favorite topic, and I want to ask you a question about that, but also gratitude. And you spoke a lot about like showing outward gratitude. Um, what are your thoughts on the importance of showing inward gratitude and like positive affirmations for yourself, especially if you're someone that is in a dark place?
Mhm. I think one practice I think with that is the thoughts that you think. You can control those. And I know people think that that's something that you can't do. And I do this with kids. So they'll, obviously it depends. I have to read the situation, but if they're struggling with something, I'd be like, "Hey, so I said, well, what are some like desserts that you like?" And they might be like, Oreos, or they may have ice cream. Like, "Oh, I love ice cream." Okay, what kind of flavor do you like? Right? And they'll go through, and then I'll share my flavors, and we're talking about this, right? And then I'm like, "Hey, were you still worrying about that other thing right now?" They're like, "Well, no, right?" But they might go back into it. I said, "What I want you to, I just want you to realize that what you thought about for just a split second was happiness of something that you liked, and that could be a vacation, that could be, you know, family." I mean, me, I come home, I have 3 dogs. Oh my gosh, dogs are awesome. They're happy all the time, right? You come home, you
Yeah.
go get the mail, you come back from getting the mail, and they're excited again. Like and and you can control the thoughts. And so there's this study done, Ronnie, and it says one thought really only controls within your body for 60 seconds. But a lot of times,
Interesting.
worries, anxieties, things like that last a lot longer. And why is that? Because I mean, I'm sure people have done this before, where you think of like one thing, right? You're like, well, okay, this happened. Oh, wait, what if this happens? Oh no, what if this happens? And then we go through these cycles, right? And we're just thinking over and over and over again about what that person might think, what this person might do, what's the worst thing that can happen. And those are things that we can't control. But that thought process, right? And the thinking, if you change what you think, and again, you were talking about like positive thoughts about ourselves, right? And
Sure.
changing that versus like, um, I know somebody recently that um doing some job interviews, right? They're trying to get a job and doubting themselves, right? And probably won't get the job. They, they probably have someone better for the job. And I said, hold on, I want you to think about this. They picked you. They said, I want to hear more about this person's story, this person's background, to see if this person could get the job. And that's just a quick reframe. And they're like, you're right. So I think the positive thoughts before any event, maybe in the morning. I have a life coaching client, and uh I like to have the post-it notes around my mirror in the morning.
Hey,
And
visual cues are so big, man.
yep, yep. Do you have some?
Yeah, I have one on the wall in my room that tells me, "You are okay. You will accomplish what you need to today, and do not beat yourself up if you don't." And it's
Mhm.
right in front of my bed.
I like that one. I like that one. Yeah. Uh there's two books that me and him both like. Um, David Goggins. I mean, I'm
Yeah.
a big. Well, I also run. So I'm big into that pushing through stuff. And so I think another one's by Tim Grover. It's a little more,
Relentless.
yes, relentless.
It's one of my favorite books ever written, man.
See, there you go. Yeah. So
Yeah.
both of those, there's so many quotes within there. And in my trouble times, I have post notes sometimes around my monitors, sometimes around my bathroom mirrors, but like saying those to yourself before something big, or even if you're struggling. And me, I'm someone that's a Christian. I go through some verses and stuff like that. And that helps ground me. Instead of rethinking those negative thoughts and the what ifs, I go there instead and it helps.
Well, it's funny you mentioned Christianity. I mean, it's very much the same science that's behind rotary beads and going through a ritual and having a way to like ground yourself, calling it different things. And obviously, we don't need to get into a religious discussion, but
Mhm.
you see examples of grounding and self-help, like centering practices throughout human history. It's not a new concept that's been around. I can't remember exactly what it was, but I know that they had something they did in Egypt, and that was a long time ago.
Yeah.
And so it works. And you also were talking about like negative thoughts and the difference
Mhm.
between like a positive. I want to go read that study. You'll have to link me to it. But the 60-second effect versus a negative thought that dwells. Are
Mhm.
you familiar with the concept of rumination?
No.
So rumination is it's basically what you do when you dwell on a negative event. Like
Okay.
you kind of think about a traumatic event. Or yesterday I asked a girl out and she rejected me. If you're in middle school, you're gonna ruminate on that for like a month. And
Mhm.
the science behind rumination shows that when you mentally go back through a negative event and remember it, physiologically, you have the same exact experience as you
Oh,
did when you had that initial event.
that's
But if you
dangerous.
have, yeah, if you have a really negative moment in your week and you're constantly dwelling on it and allowing it to spin up and go into different directions, physically, you are re-experiencing that event every single time.
Mhm.
It's been a really hot topic in like corporate America, which is
Yeah.
ironically how I heard about it years ago.
Okay.
But there's cool practices with that. And I know that we had planned for a little 30-minute show, so I can't keep you the entire night.
No,
But
no, you're fine. Yeah.
I just two things. I just to touch on the rumination side.
Sure.
One
Yeah.
thing that really, really helps for me, I don't do it as much as I used to. I used to be big on rumination, but when I found myself starting to drift off into like a recurring or repetitive negative thought, literally like clap your hands or slap a table and do something to jolt your brain, and it
Mm.
shakes you out of that headspace. And
Is
fantasy,
that when people have like the rubber band and then they
I think
snap it?
yes, same
Okay.
exact thing. Same
Yeah.
exact thing. The rubber band, I forget the name of that guy. He did a bunch of TED Talks over the last few years.
Okay.
But there's lots of really, really cool little self-help things. You were talking about exercising, and my therapist earlier this week was talking to me about a guy he just watched. I can't remember the name, but he built this program where people that are having trouble exercising, instead of like having a gym or anything, it's a 5-minute thing that you can do in the kitchen while you're doing your dishes.
Mm.
And it is apparently having like massive success for people that have never been able to exercise.
Well, that's actually the number one thing that helps mental health. So, I mean, because a part of my job, right, I get to go to conferences, I get to go and see things. So, anxiety, depression, that's kind of like the big area. And they did this big study, and instead of counseling, instead of a pill, instead of whatever else, they said the number one thing that had the best change in terms of your anxiety and your depression is moving your body and exercising. And it's quite easy too, because you think about the times maybe where you um laid on the couch for a long time, or I'm just going to lay in bed all day. You didn't feel better.
Nope.
But if you went for even a walk, you don't have to go run a marathon, y'all. Go for a walk. You get outside and do disc golf. You get on a bike, take your dogs for a walk. I love going to the dog park, man. I get a walk in and I get to see dogs. Like it's like the best place ever, or going to the gym. Like as long as you're doing that, it releases, right? Those good endorphins, right? You feel better about yourself. Hopefully you get a sweat in or something, and it helps with anxiety and depression. I've never, after workout, unless I like injured myself during the workout, felt worse after the workout than I did before.
Yeah. I love that you brought that up. It is the ingredients, and correct me if I'm wrong, my understanding are get your sleep, have a proper diet, and get exercise. And if you can do those three things, most of your primary mental health issues, which I think mental health is often like an onion, and you kind of got to peel back layers to get to
Yeah.
the core thing. Those extra layers that are really interfering with your day-to-day life get addressed if you do those three things every day consistently.
Hmm.
I'm
I agree.
speaking to it emphatically because I struggle doing all three of those things on a daily basis, and I have my
Yeah.
whole life. And as you alluded to, it's led to a lot of mental health issues for me. I have chronic depression and anxiety, and not because I don't exercise.
Hmm.
I am starting to, and I've been doing a lot more exercise over the last 2 months than I had in the previous 2 years. But
You know
it's
what's
tricky.
you know what's interesting with that is, and I want to, I want this is, I mean, for you here, because I think you're negative talking, right? But you're having positive days too. And so,
Hmm.
my life coaching client, I'll give him a shout out, Eddie. Um, he lost 60 pounds. I think might have been just over 60 pounds, within the last year. And
Wow.
he's really, he's a consistent guy, and he cataloged like how many good days, right? He did everything correct, right? Or lost weight on those days versus neutral versus bad, and he had all of them. And
Wow.
the whole thing about it was just be consistent. Hey, you're gonna, you know how it is. It's not just gonna be an upward trajectory every single time and we're perfect. And that's where I think we can like psych ourselves out. Is sometimes we're gonna have the bad days,
Yeah.
even within, because I have a little bit of a running background. Actually, hold on, right here, all these things, right? Um,
Yeah. Yeah.
and
Yeah.
and I've had good workouts, I've had bad workouts. Like you get out there and you're like, man, I'm just dead, or I don't feel good. And you have some days you're like, I feel amazing. You're gonna have all of those, but doing the workout despite how you feel within all those is what the battle is.
I love that. I'm going to keep that in mind. And just to tag into what you just said and what I was talking about, for anyone out there that is working through mental health struggles or a certain issue or habit that they're trying to break, there is no like snap your fingers thing. It
No.
takes time. You got to build in habits. There's old adages like 17 days worth of the same thing works, or 21 tries, you memorize a song. It's all true. Like, for
Mhm.
me, it's been a long 5-year process, but I think I would say personally that I had some very deep and serious mental health issues that I had to work through. Mental health doesn't have to be life crippling and serious. You can have a day like a mental health day and not be someone that goes to therapy all the time.
Mhm.
Series of negative events, all of a sudden you're checked out and you are depressed for 2 days. That's a mental health problem. It's just a blip in your day-to-day or weekly life compared to other people who struggle with it every single day. And so I could sit here and talk to you about other things with mental health for hours, but can I ask you one more question before I let you go?
Yeah, yeah, shoot.
So if you were going to give advice to someone in the fantasy sports industry who is currently struggling with mental health issues,
Mm.
what would you tell
Um, well, I guess the quick one. So we talked about gratitude, right? You're struggling the gratitude thing, moving your body, exercising, the thoughts, right? We talked about that, and then the other one is, or I guess a couple of them would be, um, um, making goals and then making some progress towards them, right? And that's something that, and it doesn't matter what the goal is. It can be reading a book, it can be anything, but I think making some progress towards goals creates happiness. Because you think of like everyone gets 24 hours. What do you do with it? And I think it's better than, going through TikTok or going through Reels or constantly updating your Twitter feed to see what's the newest thing for that someone said. Like set some goals and work towards some things on you, because like you're the only person that's gonna like truly care about you more than anyone else. And so you need to take charge of some goals that you have, whether it's, you know, any of those things, or you want to learn to play the guitar. It doesn't matter, but set something and work towards something to better yourself. I think can help. And I mean, you could track it if you want, or however you want to measure your progress. The other one is that, I mean, remember why you're in the fantasy industry. I think
me?
sometimes it can beat you up and like, what's my goal? Why am I here? If you don't think it's healthy, you don't think it's for the right reasons, you can change your course. There's nothing wrong with that. I think that's something that's important too, because I think that, I'm gonna become full time in the industry. That thing's really hard. I'm gonna get 30,000 followers and such a whatever goal. that's hard. And like, there's different people in the industry. There's people that are there for the clicks and likes only, and they're going to say anything catchy and edgy, right? That they want to do. There's nothing right or wrong, right? There's people that pick fights or quote tweet everybody and do like, that's fine if that's you, but remember who you are and why you're going to be there. And
Yeah.
that's what you have to decide who you're going to kind of be, within the fantasy industry. You can support a bunch of people. You can always just produce your own content and don't care what anyone says. But like, whatever why you're there, like, remember that. And if it's contributing negatively to your health, think about that too. Like, you can change your course. It's up to you.
I love that. I think that's a really, really good advice. To summary, add in what I forget because I'm going to forget something. We need to be and focus on gratitude outwardly and inwardly. For people in this industry that might struggle with mental health, exercise is the number one key to help you kind of alleviate the baseline for those
Mhm.
problems. And actively listening to people and really trying to hear what they're saying. Like Nick was just talking about, like, what's your purpose in the industry? Talking about strategy, and you mentioned like my goal is 30,000 followers. I would add into that. That's a great goal. Why? Is there a purpose to that? Is it vanity? And if it is, can you add something more meaningful to that vain
Mhm.
like goal that you have there? But for anyone that is struggling, there is a group in the community called Less Alone. It's on Twitter or X, and it's started by Toronto Dave. So it's just quick shout out to him. He's one of the best people in all of fantasy sports, and it's got about 70 people in there. We all share here and there. It's pretty open and private. And so if you are in this industry, you want to crack into the industry, and you kind of need a group or place where you can feel comfortable and open talking about some inexplicable problems that you're not sure people can relate to, I'm willing to bet you that people in that group can, and we're here for you. So shoot me a DM and let me know. I'll add you to it. Nick, any closing remarks from your end, just on the guise of mental health, the draft? We could talk about running backs for another 20 minutes, but we're not going to. Uh, what
Um,
else from you?
just mental health wise, like, just seriously take care of yourself. There are tons of resources out there, and I think it's probably more dangerous for guys because we don't talk about this stuff that often,
Mm,
and it's and there are people here to help. I mean, obviously, what you just talked about in this channel will help people. I'm here to help people. Like, I'm more here about people than I'm here about talking about fantasy and football stuff. You know what I mean? So, to me, I think that's the stuff that matters. And try some of this stuff. Being consistent can help. There's a lot of other things too that we could share, but we have obviously a time limit. So, but honestly, just value your time and set goals and work towards things within your time, and you'll see some progress.
I think that's very well said. And we will say all of this again at the very latest. We're going to do this again next year, Nick. Maybe at some time between then we can have a round two. But in the meantime, it's underscore Nick Whalen on Twitter. Don't get it twisted. The other guy is not the one you want to talk to. This is the one.
Thanks,
Um,
man.
and make sure you're following Nick if you aren't already. And from my end, I have no other remarks on the guys of mental health other than just to add selfishly, I've got 17 other interviews lined up for the rest of this month, and I hope to do at least one a day for the rest of the month of May. So if you are in the industry and you have a story to tell or thoughts on mental health, shoot me a dim. We'll do one. We'll find a time to do one here over the next 30 days. Again, thank you for watching. Thanks for coming on, Nick. I appreciate you, man,
Well,
so
thanks,
much.
man. This is fun. Thank you.
For sure, for sure. Well, we'll do it again sometime soon. And
Cool.
for everyone else, like, keep your head up. You're loved. You matter. Don't don't beat yourself up too much. And we'll be around. I guess I got to turn the stream off. Don't forget to smash that subscribe button. Goodbye.